All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Fruita City Council meeting. The time is now 7:01 p.m. We're going to call the meeting to order. Deb, would you please call roll?
Councillor Buck. Here. Councillor Lenhart.
Here.
Councillor Harvey.
Here.
Councillor Cry.
Here.
For the record, Councillor Cry is attending virtually. Councillor O'Brien.
Present. Councillor
Bremen.
Here. All right, we do a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd like to stand with us. We'd like to take this time to allow all faiths and beliefs the opportunity for a silent prayer. Thank you. And if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we've got an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda?
Mr. Mayor, we do have 3 changes to the agenda since it was first published Thursday. The first change is we added a proclamation for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The second one is that the special event liquor permit application was postponed because the event has been postponed due to COVID concerns. And then the third change was that the executive session was added. It should have been on the original agenda, but the executive session in order to present the formal evaluation to the city manager.
All right, thank you, Deb. With that, do we have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Move we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Councillor Buck? Yes. Councillor Lenhart?
Yes.
Councillor Harvey?
Yes.
Councillor Cry?
Yes.
Councillor O'Brien?
Yes.
Councillor Bremen?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, we've got several proclamations and presentations tonight. Our first one is a proclamation proclaiming January 2022 as National Crime Stoppers Month. I've asked Heather to read that for us tonight.
Whereas crime is a menace to our society, it tears apart lives and causes feelings of fear, anger, and helplessness. As caring citizens, we are obligated to do everything in our power to ensure that communities are not victimized by criminals. And whereas the Crime Stoppers of Mesa County program has empowered the citizens of Mesa County to take a stand against crime, this program brings together citizens, law enforcement, the media, businesses, and educational institutions to combat crime and make our communities safer. And whereas combining media awareness, cash rewards, and an anonymous tip line for citizens to contact, Crime Stoppers of Mesa County has created an effective method for solving crimes and helping citizens take back control over their neighborhoods. And whereas the award-winning nationally recognized Crime Stoppers of Mesa County has been particularly effective and since 1983 has received 21,600 tips, which have led to 1,840 arrests and the recovery of over $9,100,000 in drugs and property. Anonymous Crime Stopper callers have been awarded $313,000 for their valuable information. And whereas Crime Stoppers of Mesa County has forged strong working relationships with all area law enforcement agencies, including Colorado State Patrol, Fruita Police Department, Grand Junction Police Department, Mesa County Sheriff's Office, Mesa County District Attorney's Office, and the Palisade Police Department. And whereas Crime Stoppers of Mesa County is working to increase awareness of community safety issues and crime prevention efforts, while also giving back to our community by offering grants to various organizations, partnerships within Colorado Mesa University, and scholarships to law enforcement graduates. Now, therefore, in official recognition, we, the undersigned, do hereby proclaim January 2022 as National Crime Stoppers Month in the city of Fruita and call on all citizens to increase their participation in our effort to prevent crime, thereby strengthening our the community in which we live.
Thank you, Heather. We've got Rich Parrish here to accept this. So if you'd like to say a few words. Sure. You brought some others with you tonight, it looks like.
We're supporting.
All right.
On behalf of the Board of Directors of Crime Stoppers, we very much appreciate the support we get from the community of Fruita. This is not the first time you've proclaimed January to be Crime Stoppers Month. We appreciate the efforts here. I will have to say, living in Fruita, it would appear that we really don't have any crime here, at least not that your police department can't solve, because we haven't had any tips presented to Crime Stoppers for solving for a long time. So if you might want to encourage your police department, if there are those crimes that haven't been solved, we would be more than happy to try and help in that effort. It is a valley-wide effort to try and make sure that our communities are safe, and we do appreciate very much your support of our program.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Thank you for all your service.
Good to see you too.
All right, and our second proclamation tonight is proclaiming January 17th, 2022 as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I've asked Kyle to read that one for us.
Whereas all people, regardless of the color of their skin, the persuasion of their theology, or the level of their intelligence, were built by one creator with one blood, designed and fashioned to live on the earth with one another. And whereas Martin Luther King Jr. was a minister who dedicated his life for the purpose so we may, as Americans, truly live out the Declaration of Independence, as we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas the third Monday of each January be acknowledged as Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the city of Fruita, not as a city holiday, but as a day to acknowledge a great American who awakened a nation's conscience to not judge a person by the color of their skin, but by the content of their heart. And whereas every year in the week leading up to Martin Luther King Jr. Day, several events are held within the Grand Valley communities to not only honor Martin Luther King Jr., but to also educate and build stronger ties. And whereas in cooperation with the City of Grand Junction, several events are planned to commemorate Martin Luther King Jr. Day on January 17th. Now therefore be it resolved that the Fruita City Council does hereby proclaim Monday, January 17th, 2022 as Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the city of Fruita, and encourages the citizens of Fruita to observe this day with appropriate activities and programs that honor the memory and legacy of Dr. King. And I believe we have David Combs and Eric from Black Citizens and Friends.
You both can speak. You both have the opportunity. Don't fight over it.
We don't want to take up your time, but probably the most important thing we want to do is thank you for the recognition, especially for this day. There are many of us out there that believe that what Dr. King stood for has gone by the wayside. However, there are others that believe that what he stood for can only be acknowledged by events like this, by people like you, people in the audience. With that being said, one of the things that we're dismayed about this year is, as you indicated in the proclamation, we typically have multiple day events. Our events start on Monday and they go throughout the week and they culminate the following Monday with a program. However, this year, I don't know if many of you know, but the John Lewis Voting Acknowledgement Act was not passed by Congress. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 has been gutted just somewhat. It started in 2013 with the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court acknowledged a case, and it was Holder against Shelby County. That happened in 2013. In 2021, the Supreme Court struck additional portions of the Voting Rights Act down in a case called Brnovich versus the Democratic Party. And because of such, members of Congress attempted to pass the John Lewis Voting Amendment Act. And what it was slated to do was rebuild some of the Voting Rights Act that was struck down. That didn't happen. And because of such, the King family, they wanted to take a stance. And what their stance was, they did not want any celebratory acts for Martin Luther King Jr. Day on the 17th. They wanted commemorative acts, but no celebratory acts. For us, we tried to split hairs in terms of what was commemorative and what was celebratory. And what we basically came to the conclusion was we are not going to have any events. It's somewhat disheartening because we have events that range from reading to kids in the public library. And this year we were going to come out to Fruita and read in the Fruita library also. We have the spoken word, which is also called Poetry Slam. The Grand Junction Commission, their athletic commission, was going to hold a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. And again, that was, they were going to donate $500 in prize monies even. And so we thought that that would be a big push for us. We typically show 2 movies. We decided to cancel those. We have a service on Sunday, and that was also canceled along with our, there's also a brunch that we have. Our only events that we are going to have, it will be on Monday, and it will be reading of proclamations, which we would like to invite you to do. The national theme this year is a day on, not a day off. And what we would like everyone in the community to do is to actually make it a day on to do something for someone. Make it a day on to do something for your fellow man. We're going to have nothing more than a symbolic march. We'll have, hopefully you'll be able to be involved. The city of Grand Junction, they'll read their proclamation. Hopefully you'll be able to read yours, and also the town of Palisade will read theirs. We plan on having a symbolic march. What the family wants to occur is they want people to stand on bridges. It's like standing on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We'd like to do that, but the only bridge that we could think of was the Broadway Bridge, and that's probably not a good place to stand. So it's somewhat disappointing, but it's also somewhat enlightening that the family of Dr. King is saying, this is so important to us that we want you to forego all of your celebratory events. We're hoping that when Congress comes back, and I think it's somewhere near mid-month, that they will readdress this. But again, with that being said, we want you to be part of this commemorative event. We think it says a lot about you as a council. It says a lot about you as citizens to be involved in this. And so I accept this proclamation. I accept it very humbly, especially this year, because there are a lot of things that are going on. When we think in terms of the Voting Rights Act, we think in terms of who doesn't have the ability to vote, or the challenges or barriers that are put in front of people in their quest to vote. However, we have something going on nationally where there is a challenge to those votes that did occur. And so what we want people to do is just take a step back and look at what has occurred and what is occurring and how to move forward. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Tearing it up.
Do you know the times? Do you know the times and locations?
All right. Thank you. With that, we're going to move into our next presentation. We've got a presentation from our city's new marketing firm, Colvita Creative. So we've got Jill and Sarah here. We did have a tourism advisory committee meeting today to do some strategy in that, and they were here for that. And so they're just going to hopefully do a quick presentation on their company and how they're going to help Fruita.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Joel, you covered my whole spiel. I'm just here to briefly introduce our new marketing firm, Fruita Creative. The Fruita Tourism Advisory Council and staff, we're very excited to be working with them. As the council knows, last year our contract with Slate Communications ran out. So we did a competitive RFP process and we received about 13 bids from qualified consultants, and we narrowed it down to 3 and then to 2 and now to Colvita. So I'm very excited to have them on board. They started work just this week, and we hosted a number of envisioning sessions with the Fruita Tourism Advisory Council today, members of our public land agencies, our Parks and Recreation Department, the City Manager's Office, and a few others. So it was great to have them kick off, and we just want to take 10 minutes just to briefly go over their firm and answer any questions that the council may have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah and Jill. Oh, let me open up this presentation first.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you for that introduction, Joel, too. And thank you all for having us. We're really excited to be here today. And as Shannon mentioned, being selected as the marketing firm to promote tourism to the area, we are ecstatic. We have loved Fruita for years, and to be able to celebrate it and promote it in the right way, and in a way that drives other people to not only just visit the area, but to respect it and fall in love with it. We're really excited. And so, yeah, we've had a full day of sessions to kick it off, which has been really excited to get, really diving deep, and we have more work to do to come up with the right strategy and campaign to attract visitation to the area. But yeah, like I mentioned, we've loved it. We both learned to mountain bike here. I like it so much. I was supposed to leave town tomorrow, and I extended my stay till Saturday. So my dogs will probably miss me, but that's okay. So we're just going to take 10 minutes to go through really our process. But like Shannon said, today was our real full day of kicking off the relationship. And yeah, but I'm Jill Coyle. I always forget that part. I'm the owner of the agency. Our agency is full branding marketing agency. We're located in Eagle, Colorado. We also have an office in Boise, Idaho, and service really this mountain region.
Yep. And I'm Sarah. I'm a little bit taller than Jill. I'm the vice president of Colvita Creative, and I'm the media director. So really in charge of all the, communications once we have the brand and the campaign, making sure it gets to the right audience and making sure that we track and report on it.
So we pulled this presentation together just because to keep us on track, but we'll flip through it fairly quickly and leave time for any questions that you may have. But because we can talk marketing all day, I actually deleted some slides before this meeting because you guys have a full agenda ahead of you. But yeah, like I mentioned, we're Colvita Creative. There's others on our team that, through COVID have spread out throughout really the state and in Boise. Full service branding agency. Our philosophy is really on data, strategy, and research. And so part of the value of this session that we had today to create that or start the beginning of that relationship is really to then understand what else should we be looking at? Because we believe that brands or true brands are not just saying, come here and visit and leave, but creating a loyal connection and a true understanding to the area that they want to come back and they want to be advocates for the place. And so what is that story? And so that's the work that we're going to be doing right now that we have been kicking off. And with that, we look at other things that might influence travel and tourism culturally. Obviously, COVID was a big impact on our destination marketing organizations that we could see, okay, well, how is this impacting consumer behavior, travel decisions? And then we pair that up with the category of what we're presenting or offering to our guests, like being a mountain bike destination as one example. We'll also be looking at competition in other areas and others, not just in Colorado, but surrounding areas such as like the Moabs or things like that, that people can be choosing their vacation time or dollars towards versus coming here. And then the core equities that we offer that is different than our competition that we can provide for visitors. With that, we'll also be looking at just other things that will influence this industry trends. Obviously, we work closely with the Colorado Tourism Office as well as surrounding states just to see what they're doing, what they're paying attention to. Competitive, geographic, demographic, psychographic trends for the type of visitor that we want to be attracting to the area. And we got into this a bit today, but we'll be doing more work and looking into our target areas, Front Range, Salt Lake City. We will be defining those, but then what does the persona of that person and that visitor look like of who we want to come? And that's not to exclude anyone, but that is to attract the right visitor with this sustainability that came up often in conversation today of respecting the land and taking care of the land and, not trashing the monuments or teaching them how to camp for the first time. And so what do those profiles look like and defining them? And then one of the parts of the research that we'll be doing is taking our current campaign that we've had in market you guys have had in market for a few years and testing it with these segments, as well as other complementary messages that might support. So to be determined of if we want to enhance that campaign or switch or add into a different group or segments to attract these audiences. With that, I think Shannon shared all of the creative work that's been done with the previous agency before. And we've also had access to all of the analytics and data to see what had been working versus what hasn't gotten as much traction as had hoped. We will be taking a deep dive in that with the research findings that we have and focus groups that we'll be doing to see if there's, elevating that in some way. And it might just even be alternative to photography or something like that to support the campaign. That's really what we'll be determining in the next few months. And we'll be creating a strategic marketing plan. We'll have set goals, KPIs, and then strategies and promotions to support those goals. That also works in conjunction with the budget to stick within that. But that's what we'll be reporting back and working very closely with Shannon and the tourism board with monthly to be able to see how we're actually doing against those, the occupancy and sales goals that we have set forward, as well as other things as like, we've been talking about sustainable tourism, but if there's anything that we can track in those efforts of things that we're being able to, education tips that we're able to see are getting more eyeballs on or things like that. And then.
You're taking all my slides, Jill. No. And then along with the marketing plan to support that as the paid media. So the marketing plan can be paid media as part of that, but that's other tactics that we can put into place that may just be time to put in place, not necessarily buying media placements. But then we'll have our traditional media plan, which, we've looked at what you guys have been doing the last couple of years with, Sojourn banners and paid social and, certain publications on the Front Range to get in front of our audience. So taking a look at the budget, when we want to advertise, what seasons based on our budget and our audience, when we want them to come, what message we're doing, and then looking at this funnel to make sure we're hitting people at these parts of the funnel. So if they don't know who we are, we can't say, come here, right? We can't expect them to come here. We have to tell them why first. So, brand awareness, get them to consider us, get them to come, and then retention, like what Jill was talking about, make them loyal, and make them want to come back. And so there's examples of different media on here, but yeah, we've looked at what you guys have done. And once we get through the research and figure out where these audiences are, whether it's online or events or, out of the box ideas too, then that'll all be included in the media plan. And then these are some screenshots from Google Data Studio, which is an analytics tool that we use for our reporting. And so we will set up a dashboard like this that will help us track our media efforts and general website statistics as well. So this is for a different destination. The goal was really airline clicks. So we really are big on saying on the website, if someone's coming to our website, what is going to show intent to travel? And that helps us track rather than just saying, cool, we had 1,000 clicks from these banner ads. What did they do when they came to the website? Were they looking at the lodging page? That shows intent, right? Were they looking at mountain biking trails? So we're really deep into the reporting. It'll be done monthly, presented to Shannon, and then probably quarterly to the tourism board or more often if needed. And yeah. It was kind of quick, but we wanted to give you guys an overview and we wanted to leave time if you guys
We're okay
have
with
any.
quick. Does anybody?
It wasn't quick for Joel today because he sat through a really long meeting with us.
Joel's impatient.
Does anybody have any questions for him?
I actually do. So I understand your whole purpose is to get people to come here, but and I wasn't privy to the conversations that you had earlier, but it sounds like you can do some little educational pieces. I mean, because we've had a huge impact on our trails and our outdoors, and people just, they've discovered the great outdoors since COVID, and that's great, but they have absolutely no concept of how to take care of the land. So you
Heard that a
wouldn't,
lot.
yeah, it's huge. It's huge. So you would include little educational bits in your advertisements, and then you could, and then what? What would be the analytics so we would know if that was having any sort of impact?
Well, we'd want to point though, if it's a digital ad, right, we'd want to be maybe a blog on for first time campers on how to camp in designated spots, where to go to the bathroom, or, you know, that sort of
Not-
thing. How to share the trails. What is trail etiquette? What do you do if you come up behind someone and you're faster than
How to not
you
create
run
your
them
own
over?
line.
No.
Yeah. Stay on the trail. Yeah. Okay.
But just knowing that we already have so many people going here, coming here, we think that we can, you know, take some of those efforts and be educating people more about when they come here, how to be good guests.
That's very interesting.
Community, because we have heard that guests do blend in pretty well in Fruita, and the sentiment overall seems to be that it's great for the community, it's great for all the businesses. They get along with people at the restaurants, at the bars, but we want to make sure we're staying on that track. We don't want the growth to just be crazy, and we're bringing the wrong people here and they're not being respectful. So I think that's very important, is that sustainability, not just meaning environmentally, but sustainable tourism, meaning can we spread people out, bringing those right people, keeping it sustainable so we're not overrun like some of the destinations like Moab or, you know, Crested Butte.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for being here today, and
Thank
you guys
you.
have had a long day as well. So.
Yeah,
It's been great.
We're
So thank you
excited.
so much. Yeah.
All right, with that, we're going to move into our public participation time. This is a section set aside for the city council to listen to comments by the public regarding items that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. Generally, the city council will not discuss the issue and will not take an official action under this section. We please ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on something not on the agenda? All right, hearing none, we're going to close public participation and move into our consent agenda. So these are items where all conditions or requirements have been agreed to or met prior to the time they come before council for final action. So they'll be all approved by one final motion or single motion by council. So with that, I'm going to open our consent agenda up. Is there anybody that would like to speak on an item on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll close that and bring it back to council. Are there any questions or do we have a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Buck.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, with that, we're going to move into our public hearings. And so we've got, looks like 5 public hearings tonight since we pulled the liquor permit off from that. So with this, they're all quasi judicial hearings. And so we start those out by having a staff presentation, then the applicant will present, and then we'll allow the public for input, and then we'll close public input and bring it back to council for final questions. So our first one is ordinance 2022-01, a second reading. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Again, my name is Henry, City of Fruita. Giving the presentation on this application and the following ones as well. All right, so this is a rezone application for property located at 1877 J.2 Road. Ordinance 2022-01, it's a rezone of approximately 9.2 acres from a rural estate to a community residential zone. The property owner is Martin and Stephen Azcaraga, and obviously the location I just read in the land development application. Planning permit is 2021-30. Legal notice real quick. You can see here the buffer on the bottom right side shows a 350-foot radius, which is required. The other requirement is either the 350 or 20 unique properties, whichever you get to first. Typically the 20 properties is included in that 350. But with this one, we had to go out a little bit more to capture those properties because they're significantly larger than developed properties in town. The subject property you can see here has a single family dwelling in it as well. And that's a picture of our legal notice sign out in front of the property. A legal notice needs to happen 15 days prior to the planning commission meeting, and those were all accomplished in accordance with our code. The zoning map you can see here is zoned rural estate. And then the aerial photo there to the right shows the proximity to the intersection of J.2 Road, J.2 Road and 19 Road, in addition to J and 19 Road as well, down there at the southeast corner. Here's a clip of our future land use map taken from our comprehensive plan. You can see there circled in blue, and then zoomed in shows the area of zoning and the recommended zone of residential 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre, which was codified as community residential, which we're all familiar with, is a primary residential zone district in the city. So the review criteria is set forth in our code, and we need to evaluate this on 5 criteria. However, only 2 need to be met in order to make a positive recommendation. And so the first 2 criteria through the review have been considered as being met. The proposed amendment is compatible with surrounding land uses pursuant to the compatibility section in our code, and is consistent with the city's goals, policies, and master plan. And as I mentioned before, the comprehensive plan or a master plan does support this zone change and has supported this for some time now. And then the land to be rezoned was not previously zoned in there, but the existing zoning is inconsistent with the city's goals and policies as set forth in our master plan. And so that's what originally initiated the rezone is, you look at the comprehensive plan and you make those suggestions through the guiding document, and then you take the code section in the public hearing process, and then we get to this point here tonight. Public comments, there have been none received by staff to date. No reviewer expressed any concerns with this, I should say, rezone. And then the planning commission voted to recommend approval of 5-0 to you at their October 12th, 2021 public hearing. And then the staff recommendation is shown on page 23 of the council packet. I don't need to read that word for word, but staff does recommend the approval of the zone change of this 9.2 acre parcel from rural estate to community residential. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thanks, Henry. And the applicants are here, or representative.
Good evening, I'm Steven Swindell, Vortex Engineering, Grand Junction. Henry always does such a great presentation. I don't have anything to add, just respectfully request that, as Henry stated, we meet the 2 criteria and request approval.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that'd like to speak on this item? All right, hearing none, we're going to close public comment and bring it back to council. Are there any questions on this item?
Nope.
Do we have a motion?
Go ahead, Matthew.
I move we adopt ordinance 2022-01, amending the official zoning map of the city of Fruita by rezoning approximately 9.2 acres of property located at 1877 J.2 Road, rural residential zone to a community residential zone.
Second.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Buck, Counselor Lenhart.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, with that, we're going to move into our next public hearing. It's ordinance 2022-02, second reading. Henry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this one's a little bit different because this includes, or this is an annexation and accompanied by a rezone as well. I'm going to consolidate those presentations into one presentation, but the discussion needs to be separate from one another when you guys are making your motion or are asking the public if they have any comments. So with that, I'll get started. The application description, as I mentioned, it's 2 ordinances. 2022-02 is the annexation of approximately 4.6 acres. There's no associated address, so that's why we include the parcel for identification. And then ordinance 2022-03 would be zoning the newly annexed property as accompanied by that ordinance before. Here's a clip of our future land use map, and then zoomed in shows the approximate location of the subject property. You can see there, it is within our urban growth boundary, as you see in that dotted line, and is recommended for approval or guiding decisions for a community residential zone or residential 4 to 8 dwelling units. Approval criteria for the annexation, there are 9 to consider, plus an annexation impact report. So lots of consideration when annexations come before staff. But through the review, we have found that they either can meet or have met all of this criteria that needs to be considered. It is within the city's urban growth area as supported by our Fruita comprehensive plan or our Fruita in motion. And the annexation does meet the requirements of state statute, which if you recall needs at least 1/6 contiguity or an election. But in this case, it's the property owner initiated the annexation by petition, which meets state statute. And then the annexation map supports the 1/6 contiguity. As far as serving the property with efficient utilities and services, that is not necessary right now at this point, but it is the understanding of the applicant and the developer, property owner, that those would need to be extended if the property were to develop at some point in the future. And so those plans and guiding documents have all been shared. They understand that, you know, road sections need to be a certain width, easements and all of that stuff. Other than that, you know, other stuff is kind of boilerplate. As far as the review, it can be and has been efficiently served by police and municipal services, like Lower Valley and our Fruita Police Department as well. Moving on to the zoning, as I mentioned or showed before, it is supported in our future land use map, and the zoning needs to meet 2 of the 5 criteria that must be considered. The first one needs to, and then the next 4 are considered. But the proposed amendment is compatible with surrounding land uses. The zoning amendment to our official zoning map pursuant to the compatibility section is consistent with the city's goals, policies, and master plan. And then the zoning amendment is incidental to the annexation that I previously talked about. It is part of one, so you need to initiate zoning within 90 days per state statute, and that has been done with this application, just to kind of bunch them in together with all of the public hearing process and review. So those 2 have been met and found met. Here's shows the legal notice real quick. That star shows where those public notice signs were placed on the property there along J Road. Those were out there well within the 15-day requirement prior to the public meeting for both the rezone and the annexation petition. You can see there's 2 that show each application. No written public comments have been received, and no reviewer expressed any concerns with this annexation or the zone change recommendation. And then staff does Planning Commission recommended approval to the City Council by a vote of 5-0 at their October 12th, 2021 public. Then the recommendation is shown for the ordinance 2022-02 on page 51 of the City Council packet, and ordinance 2022-03 is on page 93 of the council packet. Staff does recommend approval of each as written in the ordinance that you guys have seen and is supported in the staff report and annexation impact report. With that, Mr. Mayor, that does conclude my presentation.
All right, thank you, Henry. Now we're up for the applicant.
Nothing to add here. Henry's demonstrated that we meet the criteria, so we just respectfully request approval.
Thank you. With this, we're going to open up. So we're going to do 2 public comments. One is for the annexation. So we're going to open that up for public comment. Is there anybody that'd like to speak on the annexation part of this? Hearing none, I'll close that. And then we're going to open up public comment for the amending of the zoning on that. All right, hearing no comments, we're going to close that and bring it back to council. Are there any questions on these items? We're going to have two motions on this one.
I move to adopt ordinance 2022-02 annexing approximately 4.6 acres of property located at parcel 2697-16400-074 into the city of Fruita.
Second.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
The second.
I know you have to have a motion.
We need a motion to, I'll move to adopt ordinance 2022-03, amending the official zoning map of the city of Fruita by rezoning approximately 4.6 acres of property located at parcel number 2697-164-00-074 to a community residential zone.
Second.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Cry.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, we're going to move into our next public hearing, ordinance 2022-04, a second reading. Henry, you're presenting on this one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Again, for the record, I'm Henry. I'm planner here for the city of Fruita, be giving the staff report on this next application. Give me a moment to share my screen here.
Sorry, we didn't catch your name.
Was it Hank?
Yeah. Can be, for sure. Similar to the previous presentation, I'll be combining the annexation and the zone request for this next parcel for consideration. It's described as Weston Estates 2. Yeah, ordinance numbers accompanying these two applications are ordinance 2022-04 and ordinance 2022-05. This is an annexation of approximately 13.9 acres and then zoning the newly annexed property after that ordinance is adopted. So here's a clip of our master plan and our future land use map taken from that. The highlighted orange box that I drew is the location of the subject property. You can see it borders 19 Road and is within the city's urban growth boundary, which as a guiding document can be supported for consideration through the public hearing process. Annexation criteria, there are 9 to be considered set forth in our code. The most significant one that should be met is the annexation needs to meet the requirements of state statute. More specifically, either the election route through state statute or the annexation petition, which is granted or initiated by the property owner. And in this case, that has been requested, and then an annexation map subsequent to that would show the 1/6 contiguity. It's important to note the order of operations from the previous annexation that was just adopted by ordinance is this annexation was short about 3 feet contiguity for the 1/6 portion, which is why one had to go before the other. But in that case, that ordinance was adopted and the information was supported in our staff report from that criteria. But in order to get there, there was a specific order of operations in order to achieve that. State statute also allows you to annex large pieces that don't have the contiguity to do those in separate parcels. You just break up the legal description and then kind of annex as a phase approach. This is somewhat similar because the properties are owned by the same person, so you're kind of doing that, but they're separated by tax parcel number, which is why one property didn't quite have the contiguity before the other. As far as the other criteria are concerned, the area can be efficiently served when development does head that way, and it's anticipated that it does. And specific improvements at intersections that are important and 19 Road and J Road, as supported in our construction specifications and our street standards, have been communicated with the public and the developer's representatives, so that there's a transparency perspective of what's going to be considered through the future growth of this area. The other items can be efficiently served by police. There's nothing on this property right now. It's just an agricultural property that's been used that way for years. and hasn't necessarily needed the police to serve this area, but it has been, does reach out to that point. So it can and is consistent with the community goals as expressed in our future land use map. Moving on to the zoning, we need to meet 2 of the 5 criteria. One is obviously the compatibility with surrounding land uses, and then consistency with our goals and master plan. This has been considered as met, and same thing with number 5 is incidental to the annexation, and we need to zone the newly annexed property within 90 days according to state statute and in our code, but combining the applications for public hearing purposes and transparency is something that the applicant and something that has been kind of something that we've done for a long time. So it makes sense. As far as legal notice goes, this has 3 street frontages, so we felt that it was important to make the public aware of this application on all 3 street frontages. You can see there in the orange stars, those are the locations of the public notice signs. There's 6 public notice signs, 3 for the annexation and 3 for the zone, the zoning request. So making that conspicuous to the public in a way that, you know, people can see. So felt like that was been accomplished as well. No public comments have been received. No reviewer expressed any concerns with the annexation or the zoning request, and the Planning Commission recommended approval to the City Council by a vote of 5-0 at their October 12th, 2020 public hearing. And then the recommendation by staff, those are written on page 122 of the council packet and for ordinance 2022-04. And then on page 165 of the council packet for ordinance 2022-05. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ditto on the comments?
Again, Stephen Swindell, Vortex Engineering. Again, Henry's demonstrated that we meet the criteria for both the annexation and the zoning, so we request approval. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to open up 2 separate public comments. So the first one is on the second reading, annexing the property. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on that item? Hearing none, I'll close that, and then we'll move into public comment on the official rezoning of that property. Is there anybody that'd like to speak on that item? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to council. Are there any questions on this item? Okay,
No.
do we have a motion for the first?
Yeah.
for the-
I move we adopt ordinance 2022-04, annexing approximately 13.9 acres of property located at parcel number 2697-164-00-050 into the city of Fruita.
Excuse me, Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Buck. Yes. Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien. Motion passes 6-0.
I move to adopt ordinance 2022-05, amending the official zoning map of the city of Fruita by rezoning approximately 13.9 acres of property located at parcel number 2697-164-00050 to a community residential zone.
Second?
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good job, Hank.
All right, that concludes our public hearings tonight, and we're going to move into our administrative agenda. One item on there is an overview and discussion of the Fruita housing strategy's next steps. So Mike, you're presenting on this one?
Yes,
All right.
and I'm going to present from here. We have Mary Elizabeth, our city attorney, on virtually, and she's going to present a portion of it. And then we have our planning and development director, Dan Karras, who will probably go up to the podium. And then that way you don't have to pass microphones around if that works for y'all. So Mayor, members of council, thanks for the opportunity to discuss this item. This is coming back and just have a discussion as requested by the city council at recent meetings. So as a quick recap for the audience or those or for the record, this is a topic that we've been dealing with for quite a good portion of last year. And at the last city council meeting, we received a report as we had contracted with Economic Planning Solutions, who did a deep dive into the housing statistics in Fruita. And the main gist of that presentation was that the average income of all of the majority employment sectors in Fruita, there's a large gap between the average incomes of those employment sectors and the average price of housing in Fruita. And that gap is so significant that the average incomes of those employment sectors are cost burdened to afford the average house in Fruita. And that's causing, when you step back, some challenges to maintaining those community values that were identified in our comprehensive plan. And so getting at the goals in the comprehensive plan that we engaged the public with during 2019 and adopted in 2020, how do we address that? And EPS talked about various strategies, and council's had many discussions on those. And with the schedule that city council has asked for, working backwards, in your packet, there's a schedule of meetings. So hopefully you've had a chance to review those. And I just wanted to, we're going to start there and then talk about the housing authority creation. So first with the schedule, we are looking at a pretty robust workshop agenda on January 25th, so the fourth Tuesday of this month, where we would be able to discuss housing goals and strategies, discussing the regulatory fee that's been discussed to help fund strategies, discuss long-term rentals and how to incentivize those because we have a severe lack of long-term rental in the community. How to discuss traditional models of the LIHTC fund projects, so the low-income housing tax credits, discuss the steps and kind of assuming if council is continuing to move forward with the creation of a housing authority, discuss the types of skill sets and types of that we would need on that authority to function to help implement these goals and strategies for the community. Also that night, we'd like to discuss communications with the public, doing a special newsletter that goes to every resident to talk about some of the data that's been received from EPS, to talk about the strategies that we're looking to implement so that we can provide more information to the public on what we're dealing with and what we're trying to and why we're trying to solve this issue, and how we are looking at doing that so that we can get feedback so that they can be involved. We also, that's a good point to just review the rest of the schedule. So we'll talk about it tonight, but have a checkpoint in reviewing the schedule and determining if there's anything we need to discuss further, right? So it's a pretty aggressive schedule that council would like to see. So we have some main points of dates that need to occur in working backwards of getting this approved by the end of March and early April, at least setting in motion. So, but we have some placeholder meetings where we can add discussions in there. But as you saw in the discussion or in the proposed schedule, we do have on the agenda tonight to create 2 special meetings to be able to aid in this process and aid in the discussion. So we can talk more about those in a bit. But looking at that, the February meetings, the regular meetings in February, or the second meeting in February, the workshop in February, and the first meeting in March, we don't have anything identified specifically, but we know we need to bring in our technical advisory committee. We know we'll need to have updates and discussion with EPS on the phase 2 study about the regulatory fee. So we know we're going to need to add those pieces in that time frame. So that's what we have there. March has 5 Tuesdays, so that's why we have a special meeting on that 5th Tuesday in March. And part of that is also to give EPS time to kind of finish some of the work that they will be working on, and set a point where you all would be able to potentially appoint members to the housing authority. Now, all this is based on discussions leading up to that and your comfort level on moving forward. So I did want to just mention a couple things. This process, this is not just something that Fruita is dealing with. As you know, it's an issue that many communities are dealing with. And ironically, even though there's a lot of case studies of communities in Colorado, especially because of resort towns on how to deal with this, as you know, in the study we've done, we've run into many of the same responses, that the traditional methods are not keeping up or not able to keep up with the demand. And so we're excited about the unique ideas that we've been discussing on maybe having a larger impact on utilizing existing inventory, utilizing new strategies to bridge that gap and create the opportunity for more workers in Fruita to live in Fruita. I bring that up because along the way, it's been a little bumpy, right? Some of the discussions we've had sometimes, and I don't mean the discussions have been bumpy, but some of the information we've received, there's been a lot of things that have changed. Early on, we had, there were pieces of information in meetings, and we've had to come back and say, that's not quite, something that was presented or an answer that we had received from getting information from a housing authority, that maybe a project, if we don't have a housing authority, they can work through another housing authority, but that's not true. And they have to work through the Fruita Housing Authority, or we would have to have a housing authority that then contracts with another housing authority. So I think tonight I just wanted to clarify that there's been a lot of things we've learned along this last year of working on this. I think we're set up really well to move forward and create good policy with the information we're receiving from EPS, with the study that we've done with a number of communities, a number of housing authorities. The other thing I wanted to mention is that no matter what strategies we adopt or embark on, there's a need for a housing authority to implement. If it's the traditional models, you need a housing authority in those situations. If it's the new, unique, innovative ideas that we have, you need a housing authority to implement that. Council, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the feedback we've gotten along the way is that even though there's the ability for City Council to be the housing authority, there's more interest in having a separate housing authority of board members, maybe a liaison like we do to other boards and commissions from council. So Mary Elizabeth is ready to go through kind of what the steps are in creating a housing authority. And there, you probably, when you read this packet, saw that there's a couple of new pieces of information, because that state statute is very specific. So the creation of a housing authority does not necessarily, there's not a lot of nuance to discuss with that. There's just very specific steps that the state creates. So it's much different, and this is I want to make a clarification, and Mary Elizabeth can expound on it as she presents, but it's much different than the creation of any other board and commission. So the city charter gives council the ability to create boards and commissions or temporary committees, to review something like the technical advisory committee working on the down payment assistance program that we're looking into to help bridge that gap for housing. But the difference with a housing authority is you are creating another entity, and that entity is separate from the city, essentially. There can be some partnership and some engagement. There's some requirements that can be built in if council sees that as important, which we would see that as important, that they report to the city council on an annual basis, that there's some cohesion with the community goals and strategies. But it's a separate group, right? If that has to stand up on its own merits. And when it's formed and they're making these decisions, if something, for instance, goes wrong, it's not backed by the city necessarily. It's its own entity. And that's the difference. This is not a board and commission that makes recommendations to council. This is an entity that would, depending on how it's created and what those bylaws, how those bylaws are created by that new board and with the direction of council, they have that purview, right, of making actual decisions of supporting or not supporting projects that maybe private developers come in to apply through the Colorado Housing Authority, or they may have, there may be partnerships with the city, and the city council creates, if for instance, a regulatory fee or one of these strategies, there's a partnership on how they are able to take that and implement it, but it is a separate entity. So I want to make that that clear. And then the steps as they're outlined in the packet, one of those steps that we hadn't discussed prior is that, and this is different from like a citizen petition that is to petition something based on an ordinance, that the city's created. This is a step that the state statute requires and is often created by city staff, right? To create an actual signatures of 25 people in the community to approve a housing authority. We have 10 signatures at the moment. Once we receive 25 that are verified by the clerk, that step actually initiates the public hearing for the resolution to create the housing authority. So there's a timing piece in that, and so we have an assumption that could be on a special meeting prior to the workshop this month, because that would be about the time if we were to receive the rest of those signatures this week, which would be which is not very easy to occur. I think we have plenty of people that are willing and wanting to sign that, but it initiates that next step. So I think I'll pause here and see if Mary Elizabeth wants to talk through, because I'm getting into the steps of the housing authority. And then let's take some questions and let's wrap up with kind of reviewing the schedule. I just want you to hear everything and then review the schedule and any concerns you have, anything you want added in as we try and think through, so we have everything prepared in addressing this in the first quarter of this year. So Mary
Thanks.
Elizabeth, are you able to? Okay, great. We can hear
I'm
you.
I'm here. Hi, everybody. So I know this is a lot to digest, but one thing I just wanted to touch on real quick that Mike was saying, that petition is a formality per the statute, launches the whole process. And that's why there's only 25 signatures that are needed. And those are typically initiated out of City Hall. And so once that petition is certified by the clerk, you publish notice at least 10 days before the hearing. So Mike, I just wanted to clarify that. It doesn't have to be within, it's at least 10. So you have to publish notice of the hearing at least 10 days prior to the hearing. So we could set it at a regular meeting. You just have to have that publication. But I know we're working on a tight timeline, so a special meeting might be warranted.
Mary Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt. One thing I left out to mayor and council is we were also looking at the reason why we have the special meetings in there as we do, and the placeholder meetings is the other meetings not listed, like the 2 weeks from today and the first meeting in February, are extremely heavy planning items on those nights. So they're going to be very, robust agendas with large developments going through, where we're going to have a lot of participation and probably some time in those public hearings. We were trying to also avoid, putting so much on an agenda for you all as well. So I left that out. Sorry, Mary Elizabeth.
Well,
No,
and
that's fine.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Heather might have shared it, but I wasn't sure that we could sign that petition, or if it was a conflict as a council person.
I would not, so I think from just an optics perspective, like I said, it originates out of City Hall. I think Dan's been circulating that. Dan can correct me if I'm wrong about that. My preference would be that a city council member does not sign it, because you will be conducting the hearing and making the determinations as to whether or not an authority is warranted. So it'd be better not to, especially since it's only 25 signatures.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that is a public hearing, and at that public hearing, you obviously hear from the public, and then you, as council, would make a determination, and it's a specific statutory finding as to whether there is a lack of safe or sanitary dwelling accommodations in the city available for all the inhabitants thereof. And I think that rolls back to what Mike was talking about with the engagement of EPS and the findings that have come out of their initial research. So assuming that you make that finding, then you form the housing authority. In your packet, there's a proposed resolution. There's also the statutory provision, because the statute then dictates how you appoint the commissioners to sit as the board of the housing authority. There are two ways you can do that per the statute. You can either appoint yourselves, the city council, to sit as the authority. My understanding from speaking with Mike and Dan and some of the discussions that you guys have had is that, your preference would make sense to have that commission, since it is a separate entity, not just be the city council. And so then per the statute, the mayor would appoint commission up to 9 commissioners with, per your charter, ratification by council and then approval by council. So that then gets you your housing authority. So I'm going to stop there, I think, for questions. I don't know if that works for you guys, for me just to stop periodically, or you can jump in, however you want to do it.
When you said ratify the charter, is that, I mean, when we change the charter,
No,
you have to go to a vote?
No, I'm sorry. It's not ratify the charter. Per your charter, it states that when the mayor makes appointments, city council ratifies those appointments.
Same as what we do for all of our boards and commissions.
So
For the charter,
the state statute says that the mayor appoints housing authority members when created in that fashion, but she's just adding in, because our charter says that council has to ratify appointments by the mayor, that you'd have both of those. So we added that in the resolution language.
Any other questions before she moves on?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I mean, then once that's kind of it, Mike. I mean, I don't know, you guys, I think you need to think about, there's nothing in the statute that prohibits city staff from sitting on the commission or city councilors from sitting on the commission. So even if you go the route of appointing 9 commissioners, and not seating yourselves, I think it makes sense to have somebody, from the planning department like Dan, who understands these issues, to sit on the commission, maybe even have 2 or 3 council members sit on the commission as well. And then, look to other expertise within the community to sit on the commission for the authority. And then the authority, you guys use city council, even though it's a separate entity, you can, once that initial board is appointed, you guys can adopt by resolution a different method of appointing board members. So for instance, you can have the authority itself appoint its next board. So it's kind of, the statute dictates this initial formation and commission. And then after that, you guys have the opportunity to change that. You'd also, the board would need to adopt bylaws, and I would imagine that actually comes mostly from city council's direction.
So oh, go ahead.
I got one question, I guess. So we set all this up, and then I guess in the future, we can still make changes as a council. I thought it was a separate entity. That's where I'm kind of struggling. Is like, okay, it's a separate entity, so they make their own decisions, but yet we're still overseeing part of that. How does that work?
There's still, sure, it is a separate entity, but this, again, it's governed by statute as opposed to governed by your charter or your code. And so the statute, if you allows for some oversight by the council even after it's formed. And that's, if you look at, I don't know how you guys have your packet in front of you, if that's electronically or if you have it paper, but on page 200 of your packet, if you scroll down, for instance, on that page, It says in section 6A, any council may by resolution change the method of appointment of commissioners after proper notice and hearing and set a date for the changed method to become effective. So you guys can, change how that's done. You don't get to control, or you don't control the authorities' meetings per se. They don't have to come to you after they make decisions and say, hey, here's what we decided, you guys approve it. You don't do any of that. But as far as the sort of initial makeup and the bylaws, you guys can create this authority in the way that you guys want to. And I think Mike touched on that a little bit too, about what powers kind of you want to give the authority, to look into some of these different mechanisms, down payment housing assistance, for instance, roles in managing properties, all those sort of things.
Once we set it up, one of the powers that we could have over them is how they are appointed and what the makeup of the commission is.
Correct.
Right. Correct.
And
are there other things that we could change besides the commission, the appointments?
I think one point to make would be, just stepping back just a moment, Heather, is that let's say you follow this schedule and we have a special meeting at the end of the month and you create the housing authority, just the resolution to create the housing authority. That doesn't mean that you have to appoint members of that meeting. And until you appoint members and there are bylaws created, it's just a housing authority on paper that will not be able to do anything, correct?
So do we create the bylaws or do they create the
So
bylaws?
they actually help create the bylaws, but council can give direction. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Elizabeth, but there could be some language added to the resolution that says, the council would like to see this housing authority focus on the goals of, you could get into the details, the goals of the city, and report on an annual basis how, back on how these are being accomplished. But they do have a lot of ability in that creation of bylaws, correct?
That is correct. But I think providing guidance in the resolution that creates the authority as to, reporting, as Mike just mentioned, reporting back to you guys, specific tasks you want the authority to follow through on, or specific, programs you want it to run. Those could be put in the authority. Put in the resolution.
So you may get to this, but for fiduciary oversight now would reside within the housing authority, not with council, but the budget for the housing authority, does that get approved by council, or because it would be its own separate funding source, council has no oversight over that?
So I mean, I'll take a crack at this, Mary Elizabeth, and then correct me if I'm wrong here, but it really does kind of depend. I mean, if the housing authority is an owner and operator of capital assets, they are free to choose essentially as a body how they're going to manage those assets. Now, granted, if they're adopting a budget and there's let's just say like an annual allocation, that comes from the city, as supporting those efforts, that obviously would come to council, and then that would go to the housing authority to essentially memorialize through their budgetary process. But it really depends. I mean, there are very varying examples of this from the standpoint that you could have housing authorities that have in the thousands of units that they manage. And you could also have housing authorities that essentially just implement programmatic elements that the city, funds. And there is pretty much everything in between that can go on.
And so we can set it up the way that we all agree is best.
Correct. Yeah. And so most conventional way that happens, which I don't think has been discussed this evening, is that, baked into those bylaws is essentially some acknowledgement that the city through, planning efforts has adopted housing goals, that they want to achieve, and that they specifically charge the housing authority with either implementing or furthering those goals, not necessarily down to the sort of idiosyncratic specificity of like, I want you to implement a down payment assistance program. It's just that we want to, you know, generally speaking, widen the net of attainability in the for sale sphere.
So are they a public entity or are all of their financials needing to be transparent?
Yes.
Yes.
And so in our resolution, we could also require that they report out their financials to us on an annual or biannual basis or something?
Without a doubt,
Correct.
there's some specifics about, I believe, you know, if they are leasing, you know, there's some production elements associated with that, but sort of raw financial data is made available.
And I mean, these authorities, you know, as Dan's exactly right. They operate in a myriad of forms across the state as to, you know, what they do, whether they really are just implementing city or municipal programs, or if they're actually acting as creating additional housing units. And in that instance, oftentimes, I mean, the goal is for that sort of program to become self-sufficient. You know, rents are coming in, you use those rents to then, you know, maintain that property, hopefully maybe purchase other property, build more units, you know, so that would be, in my opinion, like the authority budget, and they're doing their thing and managing that program and, you know, reporting that back to you, but the council is not, you know, not directing what they're doing with that, if that makes sense.
And I don't know if there's the necessarily concern is probably the wrong word, but housing authorities with obviously like a array of different things that they can accomplish and work on are bound by a, you know, very specific law, which is the Fair Housing Act. And so like they have typically lots of strings attached to the efforts, especially if they're using state and federal funds. Where this could be different for us is that, you know, we essentially, you know, might in the future adopt ordinances that create, you know, ongoing revenue. And those are ordinances that would be passed by council, you know, as a police power through our process, not necessarily through the housing authorities process. So that's another like sort of layer of protection that the dollars that come in are ensured to go out in a specific way, which is somewhat of the way that we're attempting to architect this whole thing. The reason why we might be a little all over the place with the explanation of this is that lots of housing authorities develop their own property, as Mary Elizabeth said. You know, they manage those, you know, through, you know, tax credits or gap financing through the state. And there's really a lot of rules and regulations associated with that. What we're really attempting to try and do is create a different path with a dedicated revenue source that can affect probably one of what will likely be a myriad of different housing goals that we'll be interested in exploring.
And to be clear, once we create this, assuming we create this, there's no mechanism for us to dissolve it. Once the entity is created, council.
You know, that's an excellent question that I had not looked at. I will look at the statute and give you guys that information. Typically, there is a mechanism for dissolving pretty much anything. So,
couldn't we write it into the resolution?
I mean,
well, I have to look at the statute and see if what the mechanism is, and if, I mean, the statute, it probably sets forth how that has to happen. So whether you write it into the resolution or not, it's a path if necessary to do so.
So, I mean, it's been my experience and my understanding through just sort of general observation that when that does occur, you have a scenario that we would likely be in where we have a housing authority passed by a resolution, but we don't have board members. That's typically been sort of the dissolving of a housing authority where it just doesn't have any board members anymore. And that's, I think, at least one of the arguments that somebody could make, that that's why we have a lot of paper housing authorities and resolutions on the book. It's not that they've necessarily gone to dissolve those entities, but they might have been created because there was a tax credit, you know, development that was being proposed, and then they didn't entertain any other ones. And so that entity just essentially was dissolved by not having any, board members appointed.
And a couple of things to add, going back to the schedule, I think, and Dan or Mary Elizabeth, feel free to chime in if I say something wrong here, but my understanding is, as we had a placeholder for the possible creation in a special meeting. However, we probably need some of the time in the workshop to actually discuss some of the things you'd like to add into that resolution. I would imagine have some discussion related to that, where we might need to create it at a subsequent meeting, to get that feedback. I'm assuming if we're not having that, if we're not able to, of course, the intent tonight wasn't to wrap that up, but to kind of set forth a schedule. So we have some flexibility there, because I imagine you want to, if there's pieces we would like to add in the resolution, we need to have some good discussion about that and be able to put that in writing. If we just have to give at least 10 days notice from the time, and it doesn't just kick in that it has to happen within 10 days, is that correct, Mary Elizabeth? So we just within 10
That's
days,
right.
notice of a date where that would be created. If you need that time to have that discussion, that's available too. So that's one piece. Another piece that we haven't mentioned is just in some of our research and talking with various authorities. And if you recall, Dan Karras and I attended a conference this year with various housing authorities throughout the state, and very open at sharing lessons learned, things they would do differently. From a lot of that, and as we've looked at it, our recommendations are, you can do up to 9 board members, but 5 seems to be a very productive amount that we've gotten good feedback from in a lot of communities. Of course, because you can change the way appointments are made, and you could also change, that we want to have more for a given reason. It's very typical to have people on that board that are very experienced in this area, right? In housing and development and those types of things. They don't have to be residents of the city, so that there could be people throughout the valley that you feel very, that you feel are very comfortable with the expertise they would allow for this. As Mary Elizabeth mentioned, you could determine how many council seats are on there, from 1 to more of those. And we definitely have gotten a lot of great feedback from others that what Mary Elizabeth had mentioned, having someone like the planning director on that board keeps a very tight connection, not just as a liaison, but actually one of the members on that. So having a staff member and at least one council member at a minimum is something we would highly recommend that council consider. So what other questions do you have? And then maybe we can get into trying to answer those, but then also in kind of reviewing the schedule and seeing if there's any adjustments that you'd like to make on it.
It's not a schedule thing, but it's for Mary Elizabeth. I thought the state statute says you have to have 9 commissioners.
It says up to 9.
Oh, because I was looking at 6B and it says subsequent to the appointment of 9 commissioners.
That's that is actually referring to any city and county having a population of more than 300,000.
All right. Okay. All right. We're good.
Yes. Yeah. So it's up to, if you scroll up in the statute, it gives you the up to language.
Is there any flexibility on the schedule in terms of the 25th? As per a previous email, I'm having surgery on the 25th and I will not be able to make it. Probably not be in good shape for that one, which is maybe why you want it then.
You could go virtual.
Yeah.
Well, we can do it on any day. We've done them on Mondays before. I mean, we're not.
Is it possible to do it on the day before?
If it works for council and staff.
We have plenty of time to notice it if you want to move it to the Monday.
Mhm.
I think it would work for staff versus the
Monday?
Tuesday.
January.
So it'd be January 24th.
The 6:30 or is that 7? Or what time is that?
That was at 6.
6.
But it could be at any time. We just had a council workshop after it at 6:30. That's why we did the 6 o'clock.
So we move the special meeting and the workshop.
Well,
and
except for what Mike was just talking about, if you guys want to have more of a discussion about what to put in the resolution, I think, Mike, I'm hearing we take this special meeting off and just have the workshop on the 24th.
Here's the question we have to answer, I think, about that special meeting. The purpose of that special meeting is to approve the resolution for the housing authority, right? So, and we do need to get that created sooner than later to be able to meet the rest of the schedule. But we also need to have discussion, right? And good direction on anything you want to add into that resolution. So that could be scheduled for, after the, I mean, we have to figure out, well, okay, when we're going to schedule that piece. But do you want to comment on that a little bit? I know you have some thoughts on that could be helpful.
Me?
Oh, sorry, Mary Elizabeth. I was asking Dan to get up.
Oh, okay.
Make some comments.
It's just been my experience reviewing a lot of the resolutions that have established housing authorities that they're very much exactly what is in the packet today, and that a lot of the specificity does get baked into the bylaws. Certainly, I think that the number of people and the consideration of how you're going to appoint seems to make a lot of sense as far as like council deliberating on how you want to do that. I just, I think that these authorities ebb and flow over time, and they might be very vested in some programmatic effort. And then 15 years from then, they change and pivot to something that seems to be a present need at that point in time. So I've just been counseled by those that I've talked to that the generalities of how they operate matter, and they're likely going to be tethered to the city with a council member and potentially a staff member. And there's a lot of, I think, governance that should not be overlooked by having that significant of a connection. They're also typically supported, quite directly by the city in some form or fashion financially. So I just don't want it to be too complicated as far as like how we want them to operate, because we might have to go back and amend that if they attempt to sort of chart a different path or explore other things.
So you're saying that the resolution can be somewhat general, and then we can put our specificities into the bylaws that would be created?
I disagree with.
No, I think
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, Dan. I think that's right. I mean, I think that's why the statute's so specific about the actual formation, because, and just bare bones it on the formation, because the meat of how it operates is going to come through those bylaws and how you compose the commission.
Can you just speak, Mary Elizabeth, to how those bylaws get created? So we have the general resolution creating the authority, but then how we make sure that council's direction to the authority is baked into the bylaws. Maybe if you can clarify that process, that might help.
Sure. I mean, I think so. If you typically have just a regular corporation adopting bylaws, corporation adopts that, the board of the corporation adopts the bylaws. And that's where I think what Dan was saying earlier is super important here, is by putting, by appointing a staff member or two and a council member or two onto this, I think, council could work on bylaws. It's got to be adopted by the housing authority. But that's not to say you can't give that direction. And then by having that tie between staff and council overlap sitting on the commission, you ensure that that information in the bylaws get adopted. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah. Any questions or concerns about that from council?
Well, my concern's back to perception. If you've got 2 staff and 2 council and 5 people on that.
4 out of 5 people.
Yeah.
Right. I always feel like a 7-person board is a good, healthy number.
And that's a piece for discussion for the resolution, or we leave the resolution to say up to 9. But if you want to be specific on that number, you could certainly do 7. I'm just throwing out 2 staff members, 2 council. That's just, you guys could
Well, and
obviously.
if the resolution said up to 9, then that
And
would give us some time to
Right,
decide.
then you have the ability
7
to
or
appoint.
9 or-
Right.
But I know, Mary Elizabeth, you said to ensure that we get that in there. I guess that's where I want to make sure there's no public perception that we're putting all of city staff or council in a point where we're really making that decision without some of that professional input.
Right. No, I think that that's exactly sort of the political decision you guys need to make. Remember, the statute allows you as council to sit as the commission. So that would be, full control, right? But I do think, as Dan mentioned, Mike mentioned, having, experts from the community on there as well make a lot of sense. So you create that balance between some overlap coming from the city with, experts from the community. And then, going forward, that's where you can adopt that resolution saying from here on out, after this first, term or terms, the housing authority appoints its own board. And so, as things get going, that makeup may completely change. Those are really policy decisions.
In an effort to completely derail this conversation. I do think it's really important that this is part 1 of a 2-part step. Part 1 is essentially getting the, fully seated housing authority with bylaws that the council is comfortable with. And I do think that is an interim step, and you can certainly specify that, a staff member sits on a board of a term that gets essentially annually, appointed, or I've seen that happen a lot where, you have, certain board members that are on there for a period of time to establish something, and then they go through kind of a different process, appointing them over time. So you're not, I think, tethered to this indefinitely.
Right.
There is a real concerted effort here of just getting an entity established and moving in a direction that's consistent with the community's goals and the council's goals. And I think that is, an incremental step that we can take and then make a more concerted effort, once we have a lot more data from EPS and have developed those housing goals. So I just don't want the council to feel like you're, got to get it right at this just absolute first crack at it.
No, I think if the language in the resolution says up to 9, then that will give us time to hash out.
It's up to 9, and the statute is also specific that this initial board, whether it's 5, 7, 9, whatever, has to be appointed for staggered terms. And that goes exactly to what Dan was just saying. So you create, somebody's on for 2, somebody's on for 3, somebody's on for 4, and then you establish after that just the regular, how everybody then sits for 4 years or 2 years or whatever term you want to decide. But initially those terms are staggered per the statute.
So do we want to move both meetings to the 24th then?
Well, that's my concern. I have to have time to think about it. When we always schedule on Tuesdays, I hate to say it, Matthew, but we're trying to change everybody else's schedule for one person. And so I don't know if everybody can change it is the question.
I can.
It looks okay to me.
It's good with me too. So,
Or for you, Ken?
Request, I think.
right. So, and Ken says he's good. So we do both the special meeting and the workshop on the same night, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Or does Lori want to do the workshop on Tuesday when we have to have 2 meetings? All right.
Thank you, everyone.
So move those to Monday, the 24th.
More donuts.
So I want to make sure we have clear direction from you all that is there a comfort level of the city council and direction of staff to complete circulating the petition to get the 25 signatures and set the hearing date for the creation of the authority for after which those signatures are created, and set that for January 24th at 6 p.m.
Everybody good with that? Ken?
Yes.
All right. Yes.
Okay, great. One other thing to mention with the Housing Authority, as you all know, there are various developers, and there could be in the future, right, various private developers that want to bring forth through the city and for zoning approval for a affordable housing project. But on the flip side, they are going to the Colorado Housing Authority to apply for, low-income tax credits. One thing to point out is that this is what separates, council continues to operate in the zoning piece, but the housing authority is that group that would vet, and that could come from direction from council prior to in the creation, right? When you're working on bylaws, what is this housing authority working on? And whether those are a part of it, but that's the group that would then vet those kind of projects and see, okay, is this just like a business plan, right? Is this a sustainable project from the housing standpoint, from the, is it going to withstand the tax credits and the reporting that has to be done for 15 years? Is it going to withstand how it's managed, how it's, beyond those first 15 years? So just another nuance that housing authority, and we'll talk more about that at the workshop when we go through. So just clarifying, we're going to keep the general language that the statute creates up to 9 and put very similar to the draft that we have in the packet. Schedule the hearing for the 24th on a Monday at 6 p.m., following which we'll have a 6:30 workshop to discuss all the items I mentioned at the beginning. And we'll finish the petition, of course, before that, and then certify those signatures, post the hearing for the 24th at 6 p.m., and then have the discussion of the workshop, the workshop discussion following that at 6:30. So everybody's good with that. Okay. And then I think at that meeting, we can review the rest of the schedule, and kind of look at, okay, when do we have some updates from APS, from the Technical Advisory Committee? We have some flexibility there. But as you see on the schedule, the only other thing to really point out is working backwards from, if we were to create the regulatory fee, there is and we were to do that, the first and second hearing, you see the schedule there for a special meeting in March where we have a fifth Tuesday, which could actually, depending on the progress and the other meetings, there could be the possibility we don't need a workshop on the 4th Tuesday because we're going to have a special meeting on the 5th Tuesday, but we can consider that later as we get further along, right? The only other piece that is a little bit different than the housing authority and the housing pieces, but something that you brought up at the last meeting, is a little bit of a separate topic, but connected, is the short-term rentals. And if you recall, council adopted close to a year ago, a temporary limit on short-term rentals in the downtown core, or the triangle, as we call it, between Pine, Otley, and 6 and 50, right? And 50 units. As you know, even at the last meeting, we knew we had, I think, 4 or 5. I think 3 have already opened up, and at least 3 of those, is that correct? So now we're at a waiting list of 2 or 3. So it continues to change. People move, people sell the place, and then that permit, is no longer there. But because, so city council, so when you adopted that, the new language in the code for the process for short-term rentals, there is a language of the temporary limit in that period. And it requires action of the council to at least set a hearing date to change the limit. So at least set the date before April 1st is how we're interpreting it, as we reread that language in the code. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to hold the hearing, but you actually have to set hearing dates by the 1st of April. That could be after that date to actually make any change or continuation or anything like that, because it is set as a temporary limit, in the wording that way. So it's another topic we can discuss further at that workshop, but I just want to make you aware that there is some limited time. And remember, it's not just set the here, like there's the notice time period. It does not have to go back through planning commission. It just needs to go to council. But there would be a first reading calling for a public hearing and a second reading, right? So time, time is of the essence in acting, and even if it's a continuation and no change, there still has to be that hearing scheduled. So anything I missed there, Mary Elizabeth, on that you wanted to add for?
No, that's right. I mean, we reread that provision, and we just need to move to set those hearings. The hearings don't have to be before April 1st, as you said. You just have to set them prior to April 1st.
So we can revisit that at the workshop on the 24th now as well and discuss it. But I just wanted to get that in your minds of, it won't be, it's not just a discussion and kind of direction or a decision. It definitely needs to go through the process of changing the code to adjust the temporary limit.
Is there a reason that we wouldn't just set those dates now? I mean, I don't know. Because they're going to have to be set anyway.
Right.
So
they are going to have to be set. And I think, for us, it'd be good. We can set the dates. We definitely just want to know, we want to get good feedback on kind of what we're bringing forward at that. And so I think there's plenty of time to set dates in that time frame after a discussion at the workshop. But if you wanted to set them, I mean, it's council's prerogative on when to set those dates.
I mean, when you set the date, you're not determining what's going to be said, right? I mean, it's going to be.
Except for when we post notice of those dates, we post the language, correct?
Yeah. Well, and don't we know what the language is?
No, unless.
Either to continue, well, I mean, no, I mean, either to continue or not. Isn't that what the vote will be?
I guess what I'm saying is we typically have a draft.
Or you could modify it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You could modify it.
Lots of discussion there. Yeah. When is that surgery? We'll have it on that day.
The 25th to the 29th.
You'll be on. Okay, we'll do it then.
So we could, I mean, like anything, we could bring a staff recommendation and put that in and call for the hearing, and you still have the ability to modify, right? It doesn't mean you.
Oh, I mean, it's a public hearing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you whenever you choose to do those dates, we would then have to meet the deadlines for that with a staff recommendation. Then you'd have the ability to modify in that hearing, hear from people, consider the staff recommendation, have council discussion, and make a decision whether it's the same or not, right? So any modification. So it's kind of up to you. Do you want to have a?
Well, sorry, I was putting it in my calendar, the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We want to just go ahead and have staff put forth language so we can get the hearing going and then have that discussion to keep, modify, or drop that language. But I mean, we just have to have a starting point.
I
We already
think that's
know among
helpful.
us we're not going to be able to easily give them, here's the number, so they should just come forth with their recommendation, have the hearings, have the discussion with public, and then go from there.
Yeah, because we don't have any reports. Are you guys good with that?
Sorry, can you? I was asking Dad a question.
Recommendations on what you feel we, as staff, we should change, either change, keep, modify that.
Sure. I mean, we're totally fine to bring recommendations. So do you want recommendations to discuss at a workshop, or do you want recommendations just in a first and second hearing?
I'd say we need to have a discussion at a workshop.
Yeah.
And
Those discussions just go in circles.
Yep.
I'd rather put it on a damn meeting and get it over.
I'm with Lori. but I would phrase it, or go ahead and move it to a first and second.
I mean, I could tell you right now what the staff
Yes.
recommendation would be. We know what the staff recommendation is.
What is it?
Well, we would look at it from the aspect of taking the data from EPS. We have a shortage of long-term rental. So we have to do everything we can to keep the availability of long-term rentals. And there's a connection. It's not the only connection. So we would look at it from the aspect of there is no magic number between 50 or 60, but we do think there needs to continue to be that limit. So we would probably be bringing some numbers such as, we would probably recommend a number somewhere close to plus or minus 60 and continuing that way. I'm just saying we'd have to review it a little bit, but we would probably recommend going up from 50, but not terribly much up from 50.
Well, and it would be great to know what your reasoning would be behind whatever, whether it's staying or, yeah. So I like the recommendation.
We had a public hearing, and is everybody good with that?
Yeah, we know our discussions.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you want us to set those public hearings, so we can just set those anytime prior to, I'm thinking we're looking at
There's not a heavy schedule.
we got to look at the notice time frame, but we're looking in that, probably in that, the final being in March at some point.
No sense in pulling this Band-Aid off slowly.
All right. Ken, you're good with that? All right. Ken's good with that. Anything else with the schedule, Mike?
And staff is good with that?
All right, well, if we're done with the overview and the discussion of the housing next steps, let's move into the city manager's report. City manager's report.
Is that Mike?
Mike Bennett.
Sorry.
He also goes by Hank.
Gotcha. We were just discussing probably the soonest we could do a first reading would be the first meeting in March or the second meeting in March. And then that would set forth the hearing towards the end of March or first meeting in April. So we'd be in that time frame.
Sounds good.
Okay. The city manager's update. Thanks for the opportunity. We have just a few items. We wanted to make sure council has the opportunity to discuss if one of the council members can attend the Martin Luther King activity that was brought up this morning. So that could be during your updates, but just didn't want to forget that. I actually don't know. I don't know if the
Grand Junction City Hall.
Okay.
I'm available at that day. I mean, I can go. I know Kyle usually goes.
Yeah,
So
I will be there either way.
if we have more than three, we have to put it on the calendar.
We'll probably we can just put it on the calendar. That way there's no concern if more of you show up.
But I don't, what time?
I also think it'd be great if you wanted to read it there. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm open right now, so I'll put it on my calendar. Just give me the time. Mike, get us all the time and then we.
Okay.
That'd be good.
We'll do that. And then
it's usually midday.
That's the 17th.
And then another update, just a reminder that today was the first day and that goes through, and Deb, you're gonna have to correct me, is it through the 24th that people, so starting today and through the 24th are where registered voters in Fruita can pick up packets to run for council or mayor. So when we've had a couple picked up today already, and tomorrow the city clerk's office will be updating the website. There's still some updates to be made on the website, but we've had this in the city link. We've had this in the weekly updates going out and other means to the public. So starts that period of time and that's for people to pick up packets. There's a certain amount of signatures and paperwork, as you all know, but for the public to fill out as a registered voter if they are interested in running for city council or the mayor position. And then the only other item, and we don't have to discuss it or have an answer tonight, but we would like to get some clarification from city council related. We have a great new proclamation policy, right? So we know when people are requesting a proclamation be done by city council, that we have a group that's going to accept, a group that's, requesting and fills out the request. And that triggers a discussion at a workshop, which is putting, council deciding if you want to put on a regular meeting agenda. We have a little bit of confusion if council has in their minds that there are, aside from that policy, because that's the only policy we have, if there are proclamations that you expect us to initiate that are just annual proclamations that you want to make sure council does, whether somebody requests it or not. So I think at a future workshop, it would be good to just get that feedback and for you all to think, and we can provide prior in the packet, what are the proclamations we've done in the last 2 years or the last 3 years, right? And give you that list. But we just don't want to miss something because someone didn't request it, but then council feels, hey, we really wanted to proclaim. We do that every year, but it didn't initiated through the process. So obviously it's your decision on what proclamations are put on there. So want to add that, probably a quick discussion, but want you thinking about that so that we're not guessing or missing something, because it almost happened. It kind of happened, almost happened for this meeting, and that's why we had that addition. So anyway, that's all I have for tonight. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Mike. With that, we're going to move into our council reports and actions. I think we have the first one, scheduling 2 additional meetings. Do we need to have a motion on those to do that?
Yes, that would be great. I would make note that the first one is different, right? So 24th special meeting on the 24th at 6 p.m. And now it would be rescheduling the workshop at 6:30 on the 25th to the 24th at 6:30. And then there'd be the special meeting in March. So a little
Need
different.
2
than we have.
motions, you're saying, one for each?
You can make one motion for both,
Right.
for all of
Anybody
that.
want to make a motion for? Matthew can do that
I was
since.
about to say,
Yeah,
yeah, and
Yeah. So for city council to schedule a special council meeting at 6 p.m. on Monday, the January 24th, reschedule the workshop that was originally scheduled for January 25th to January 24th at 6:30 p.m. and schedule a special meeting on March 29th at 7 p.m.
so moved as stated by
Smart.
our city manager.
Oh, second.
Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien, Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Buck. Motion passes 6-0.
All right, let's move into our council reports and actions. Let's go ahead and start with Ken.
I've had no meetings since we met last. I'm not going to be around for the Martin Luther King event, but I highly recommend it. I usually go to those and they're great.
All right, thanks, Ken. Let's go down to Matthew.
We've had no meetings since our last council meeting. Just thank you, everybody, for your changing of schedule for the 24th.
All right, Heather.
Parks and Rec met last night, and our new director is, I think, doing a great job. And so we talked a lot about the Reed Park renovations that are scheduled for this year. And then there's an interesting thing about the pool filter. Do you know the dilemma with the pool filter that has to be replaced? It's huge, and they're like considering ripping out a wall in order to get it. I mean, who designed that thing that you have to like unbury it?
Who paid for it?
Yeah, taxpayers. Anyway, so they're trying to figure out the most efficient route to replace the filter. It was very interesting. So
That's it.
and then planning commission meets next week.
All right, thank you. Lori,
Can you come back to me? I'm writing dates down.
I can do that. How about Karen?
No meetings.
All right, Kyle.
Historic Preservation Board met, and they're going through the process of looking at how to effectively reach out via the website. So looking at things like adding some photos and maybe a short, history of Fruita, as well as some supporting documents and things like that. And just going through that process. That's it.
All right, thank you. As I mentioned before, Shannon and I and Mike had all attended the Tourism Advisory Council special meeting today, just trying to kick off Colvita. So that was good, getting them some information and just having them get enough information for their homework. So that's the only thing I have to report at this time. You got all your dates in? You ready?
And it's, so I don't have any meetings stuff. We have GBT meets the end of the month, but just upcoming meetings that I will not be at, January 18th. And depending on what we're discussing, I can maybe make that late, but I will be missing all of February 1st and all of February 15th. So apologies.
Busy woman.
I think I'm scheduled to miss the 18th as well.
So I need to mention something about the 18th because it's critically important. We've, as you know, we've mentioned before, there's the Dwell final public hearing is on the 18th. And there is a petition that was through our old land use code that creates, and I'm going to say this wrong. It's not necessarily super majority, but the only way that has to be voted on and only can be approved if at least 5 votes are on there. Now, we can't talk about the project right now. We can't talk about how anybody's voting. But if we have 2 missing, there's no chance of that passing. Like, we have to have a full quorum for.
Well, we can push it. We can push it back, or we can't. Can we?
I don't think we can
postpone
even. You can continue it in the hearing.
Sorry, I'll jump in. I could remote in. I'll be on vacation in a faraway land, but I'll have internet, and if it's an important meeting, I'll make it.
And I can be late. I just will miss the beginning. Okay. So I guess we'll know when the agenda comes out how far down it is, approximately what time it is.
Or can you put it?
Oh,
far
can
down?
we put it at the end of the?
Yeah, we should
Oh,
probably
put
not
this
put
way.
it at the beginning.
Learn that we can change the schedule to whatever we want to change it to, so we could put public hearings at the very last thing of that meeting if we wanted to. It'd be after every other agenda
I
item.
feel like a hypocrite because I will not be here. That's the one. But I'm not needed.
Well, we still have his evaluation to do.
Yeah, I'm just lining that up for great right now. No, yeah, so we can. It's not necessarily.
You're gonna need to talk into the mic if Ken's.
It would have, I guess, I said that wrong. It's not about it couldn't be approved. We wouldn't be able to conduct the hearing unless we had the required amount because of that petition. So it would have to be opened and continued if by chance there were not enough people.
Well, if we can make it late and Lori can make it, then that's.
But we
fine.
can't have a whole hearing if Lori's not here at the start of it.
Oh, I see.
Or but if Ken's here remotely, we have our 5.
As long as nobody gets sick or.
Well, I was just saying,
injured.
if we only had 4, we couldn't at the time, even if you're getting here late, because we couldn't start a hearing.
Is there a approximate time you think you might make it that night? I mean, not to put you on the, well, I am putting you
We
on.
can
the
do
spot.
cupcakes and cake intermission.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're here
Donut.
by, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
No, that's good. That's good to know. Great.
All right. Anything else, Lori, you want to throw in there? All right. That's all we have for council reports and actions. So now we need to have a motion to move into executive session. What? Yes. Where's it at?
Oh.
It's not even in there.
I move to move an executive session to discuss personnel issues, understanding that discussions of such issues. Session CRS 246424F to present the formal review of the city or to the city manager.
Second.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes, with a 5-minute break.
Counselor Buck, Counselor Linhart,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
Like.
All right. All right, the time is now 9:53 PM and we return to the open meeting. We just finished the city manager, Mike Bennett's annual review. Do we have any motion?
To increase, can you hear me? Can you hear me? To
Yes.
increase the city manager's salary to the amount of 150,000 per year to be effective on the very next paycheck.
Second,
All right. Ken, did you want to do the round of asking for a vote like last time?
Sure. Counselor Buck,
Yes.
Counselor Linhart,
yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yep.
Counselor Heather.
Yes.
O'Brien.
Yes.
Counselor Bremen.
Yes.
And Counselor Fry.
Fry. Yes.
All right, motion passes
Motion.
6-0.
There you go.
Since there's nothing else on our agenda, we will adjourn at 9:55 PM.